Welcome to the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel, which aims to provide you with language, tools, and guidance in your journey towards personal and relational wholeness. We'll discuss topics ranging from psychology, spirituality, leadership, sexuality, and more. My name is Michael, and I'll be your guide for stimulating musings and host for insightful interviews with thought leaders, practitioners, and experts who have a thing or two to share about living an integrated and meaning-making life. Whether you're looking to deepen your connection with your interior world, overcome challenges in your relationships, or expand your psychosomatic horizons with fresh perspectives and paradigms, the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel offers a safe, playful, yet challenging space for dialogue and introspection. It is all a gift, so let's go enjoy it together. Welcome back to the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel. I'm so excited to talk about this topic today. It's something that I weave in to almost all of my content, this idea of projection. And before I go into that, I just want to say a special thanks to one of my clients and friends, really, Ingrid. Ingrid has given me permission to share her name. And this episode and the blog post that's connected to it is rooted in a conversation that we had. I mean, it's rooted in a lot of conversations we've had, but some of the things that we went into, we were just tossing out. We were spitballing pure gold, literally. Literally, but in like a metaphorical way, in our conversation. And I was just like, I got to get this out there. Like, people need to hear this conversation or hear some of the things that are embedded here. So our topic today is all about idealizing the divine. But when we say the divine, I'm not even just talking about like God. I'm talking about what we perceive to be kind of beyond us. When we idealize anyone or anything that is just out of reach, that's not bad, but we have to become conscious that we're doing it. And then if that idealizing is so strong that it keeps pulling us into the atmosphere of that person or that institution or that space, we then have to start doing the work to slowly integrate what we perceive to be the ideal. Otherwise, you've heard me talk about, and you've heard others talk about this idea of limiting beliefs. Well, you can have idealizing beliefs that limit you because as long as something stays in the ideal, you never have to embody it. It's always potential and never moves into the concrete. So people will limit their lives by perpetually idealizing something, right? So, thank you, Ingrid. Thank you for all the work you've done and how the work you've done has begun returning to me and in ways that I didn't anticipate. So thank you. Here's the first quote that I want you to work with. In order to grow, we must project. We must project parts of us that we can't see in ourselves. Now, not only should we do that or must we do this, but we do this. You can't not project. It is a function of the psyche. It's like having an organ in your body. You can't not digest food. If you eat something, your body does it. You don't tell it to digest. You don't tell it to stop digesting. It does it, or it doesn't do it. It has your digestive tract has a mind of its own, literally. So we project whether we want to or not. What we have to learn to do is access those projections and learn to work with them and see them as invitations to greater wholeness rather than something that feels like a judgment. People will often be like, okay, well, I don't want to project. Like, they don't even know the word project. They know the word judge. And so like, well, I don't want to judge someone. Like, no, you need to judge them. Judge them all the way to the core of what you think about them because you're going to find something in yourself. That's kind of the negative side of projection. We're going to talk about the positive side. When we judge them as better than us, as beyond us, as having something inherently qualitative about them that we don't have. Robert Johnson, in his book, Inner Gold, talks about, the subtitle is understanding psychological projection. So he talks about this positive projection of our shadow or our hidden life. And projection is a phase that we have to go through in any developmental process. When you are a student and you go to a class and you are standing in front of a professor, you're not just learning the content. You are experiencing the projection of knowledge that is not accessible to you. And it is being performed, displayed, reflected back so that you can assimilate it and integrate it into your own life. This is even more true in like an apprentice situation, right? Like if you're an apprentice of someone who is a master at something, you are working towards that. In fact, that's the whole point. You're not meant to stay an apprentice for indefinitely. You're meant to move towards this role of being a master. I'm watching Star Wars from like episode 1 all the way through, and the Jedi progression, for example, is one of those where you've got the Padawan moving to the full-fledged Jedi. Like that process takes place over the course of time, but it's not. The point is not for someone to remain a teacher to an apprentice for forever, right? There has to be a progression and a movement. This moment, there is a moment, let me say that, there is a moment in every spiritual journey when our projections, what we have seen in someone that we have idealized in another, has to start making its way back to us. Johnson says there comes a point where we have to ask for our gold back. And as leaders, if you're a leader listening to this or you manage people, you have to know that they are projecting their gold onto you. Now, they're probably also projecting their shit, but there are people projecting their gold. And you have to have the capacity to give that back. You have to know that that's not your gold. If you've invested or projected your gold onto someone or something, you have to ask for that back. Maybe not literally, but you have to be conscious that you've done that and that it's helped you at some level, and now you got to get that back. This is a sacred turning point. When you begin to embody the gold that used to be something you admired in them, it's now something that is embodied and acted upon. And until that exchange happens, that gold remains externalized and it remains idealized, and it ultimately limits our potential for our life. So in the Christian mythos, the gold carrier is Jesus, right? You could talk about God in like an esoteric sense, but we're going to focus on Jesus, which is this embodiment, right? Because Jesus is, there's this embodiment in the mythos, in the Christian mythos, that Jesus is kind of who we need to aim to be, but we're never going to be like Jesus, but we got to aim, but if we get too close, we're like, hey, don't get too prideful. I mean, it's a real mind fuck, honestly, because you're like, I don't know what to do with my hands situation. But Jesus has been our gold carrier. Even if you're not in the church or you're not affiliated with Christianity, if you grew up in that, Jesus became the gold carrier. And I would even say if you left the church and never got your gold back, guess what? You've got some serious cash, psychologically speaking, still sitting in that account. I encounter people all the time who can't access their own spirituality, even though they left the church. It's because your spiritual godlikeness, that gold is still locked away in that strip mall church that thought it was kind of God's gift to the world, but it was like the owner of the strip mall was like, here's another one. We'll see in 8 months, right? Okay. Jesus is not just a teacher, right? Or a model. In the Christian mythos, Jesus is essentially this godlike character, the one that does all sorts of things for us. Think about it. When we think about Jesus and how that the mythology works, Jesus saves us. Jesus, intercedes for us, meaning like the access to, the divine source isn't direct. There's an intermediary kind of person. So we are kind of further removed from that source, that source of divine energy. This creates a psychological problem, because the more we idealize Jesus, the harder it becomes to see the divine in ourselves. The more we see Jesus's actions, we read them, or we don't even read them anymore, let's be honest. Most people just refer to them mentally and how they remember it. But we think about those actions and the things that Jesus did, or the stories that were told around that. It becomes like he is just the carrier, and that robs us of something that we ultimately have within us. But in fact, like if you read the Gospels, if you read the actual story through a lens that isn't just filling in the narrative before you actually truly engage it, Jesus never said, worship me. He said, follow me. And he called others into their own radical path of transformation. He said things like, take up the cross. Don't just admire Jesus's bravery or his, that must have been so loving. Because if we project bravery, Jesus was so brave, then like we might feel brave by being in proximity to Jesus, but then we almost never embody our own courage. This is why some of the people that I think, I'm like, you've never taken a true risk in your life, but in their psychology, because they're connected to Jesus in some way in their minds, they're the ultimate embodiment of like, they feel like they are living on the edge. In fact, they will even present that way. It's like their life seems like it's on the edge. Like they're always on the precipice of something, and it's like been that way for decades. That is what happens when you never integrate your own courage, because once you integrate your own courage, your own bravery, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like constant on edge or on the precipice. It just feels like you are moving through your life with more confidence. Yeah, there's spikes in that, but for the most part, it's like pretty even keel. We have to, like, even this idea, well, I'll get into that in a second. Okay. When we get into metaphor, that the cross is a metaphor for something that's intangible. That also creates a problem, right? So Jesus, you'll hear in the common Christian myth something like, we have to take up our cross too. And that's indefinite, right? Because at some point, everyone has a different cross to bear. But that has to be really concretized in reality, in like your body, in the earth. Like you have to carry something that is yours to carry. And it can't be Jesus's to then carry with you. That doesn't mean you're disconnected from the divine source. That's actually not the point. What you need to understand is that carrying that cross is the work of both embodying the burden and connecting to the divine source, right? Because Jesus, like the whole mythology, even like the interactions at the end of Jesus's life were all about how he maintained that divine, that connection with the Father, so to speak, right? The divine parental abundance. So when we carry our own cross, it is not that Jesus is doing it with us. It's that we are embodying the very thing that Jesus did in our own way, which is both the burden and the access to source power. and love and wholeness and abundance and forgiveness. So when we idealize someone, we place them kind of like on a pedestal. They become unreachable. And then we, in some ways, become unnecessary, which only further, what that does is if we become unnecessary, then their presence in our lives is almost like the air we breathe. Like we have to have it. We can never be far from it. Because if we're too far from that which, we've put on a pedestal and is like, the image of God for us, and we are unnecessary, then like we will, it's unbearable to truly believe that we are unnecessary. So then we have to maintain proximity to that divine image. When we elevate another as the sole bearer of wisdom, love, spiritual power, we unconsciously exile our own access to those very things in ourselves. And then it's essentially like we outsource it, and now we have to go buy it, right? I heard someone talking recently about like how capitalism, we used to have access to community, to food, to like all the things we needed, but then the way that capitalism comes in and basically buys up everything, and then now you have to go buy the thing that you used to get through relationship, you now get through monetary exchange. That is the same thing here. You have access to the divine. That's actually what Jesus is saying. But the evangelical common Christian myth mirrors back the capitalistic mindset that is, oh, what was a natural resource, we now own that, and you have to go connect with it. And it's crazy because what you have to go connect with is maybe the very thing that you already had connection with. You have to now go connect with the divine because it's not in you. It's not indigenous to you. It's not natural, and it doesn't grow naturally in you. It's something that is harvested and now is sold to you in a package that you have to go back and buy over and over and over again. And it's a way of spending so much energy to get very little energy back, just enough to keep you alive. This is what Carl Jung called the danger of the one-sided psyche. It creates a split between this, quote, good self, which is usually external, right? It's the one that you've projected onto, and the shadowed self, which is the internalized. And we see this split everywhere in Christian culture, in the common Christian myth. Jesus is good, I am lost. Jesus is divine, I am, sinful. Jesus is worthy, I am unworthy. Jesus has all the value. I don't have any value without Jesus. Like, I'm lost, I'm broken. And I know that even people listening to this probably aren't even in the streams of Christianity that have this like, you are a worm kind of thing. But that's why it's the common Christian myth, because you might have grown up in a progressive United Methodist church, but I'll tell you, that stuff still gets in, because what all of the streams of Christianity have in common is an external God image that really never gets to get worked in. Very few do that intentionally and like consistently. Even the most progressive, like ecumenical churches I've been a part of, I've seen where there's still this like ambiguity. Like I thought that was like within me, and that there wasn't an other. There wasn't me and then God, but it's like there's both, and it's mystery. No, it's usually still very much like, is God a he, or is God a she, or is God a they? Like, why are we asking that question? Like, it's you. Of course it is. And it's not you. And that's a paradox, and it's just mystery. But you know what you feel. You know what your body's telling you. And you know when something is not working. And I'm convinced that people will reject their own intuition many, many times. And even, in fact, as I'm saying all this, I know that there are people who are like, but Michael, that's not what the Bible says. That's not what Scripture says. I'm like, yeah, listen, the reason that you're even quoting Scripture when I'm talking about this stuff is likely because you have outsourced your own intuition into a book. Rather than that book being a living word that you relate to, it now is where the life is, where the wisdom is, where the intuition is, and it essentially supersedes anything you could bring. And you've learned that. You've been taught that, and you've embodied that over and over and over again. You may know you don't want to do something, but the word says this is how you do it, so you stay in a relationship that is actually abusive to you. Or the word says this, so you deny something core in yourself that actually has the power to transform your life. So that outsourcing thing is not just Jesus. In the common Christian myth, it's kind of everything. Like, it then turns into how we act in our jobs, in our marriages, in our friendships, in our relationships with our kids. If you are an adult who doesn't have kids, your relationship with your parents. I mean, it just changes everything. In my conversation with my dear client / friend, Ingrid, we had talked, we kind of brought up this idea that the church is a little bit of like a multi-level marketing organization. And she was telling this story about when she was younger, pastors would say things like, if you have the faith, if you follow Jesus, you're going to be able to cast out demons and bring people back from the dead, or, grow a leg out of somebody, and, all these stories. And she was young enough, and kind of as she put it, in that the emperor has no clothes mentality, she just would ask these pastors, like, hey, so like, tell me about a time when that happened with you. And they never knew what to say. They never had much. They didn't have anything. And what I realized in that moment was that is true most of the time, actually. And when people do have stories, they're old. They're not current. They're like this idealized past where something happened and it got canonized in their mind about how things are, or at least how they should be. And then they're living off of that capital of the past, so to speak. But Ingrid and I were talking about how like these pastors have projected their gold onto something else. They don't even know anyone. They don't have a first-hand experience of someone being raised from the dead. Most of them have projected that gold onto the past with Paul, or with stories in the Bible, with stories of like mission trips, or missionaries doing wild things. I'm not even here to debate those things. Listen, I work with energy. I've seen some crazy shit. I've also heard stories of crazy shit. I'm at least like secondhand, of those things that I've heard. I believe it. I believe things like crazy things can happen. However, when they become the ideal and they are not embodied, it is like you taking this power that you have and investing it on this ideal that's external to you. And because you've done that, because these pastors have done that, they now really function with a psychological deficit of their own power because they've invested it into this ideal. Now they go and lead a church, and now they have access to the golden projections of so many people around them. Yeah, like I know enough pastors to know they don't just get love letters in the mail. They're not getting like claps. There's a lot of shit coming at them too. Pastors are, for better or for worse, they are absorbers of projection. Any leader is. But when you put them into a spiritual space, a sacred space, it's bad. But where pastors really can create a very toxic environment is because they don't have access to their own gold. They start to accumulate it from their congregates. They start to accumulate it from the people around them. they need that. And I'm convinced that that's at least a pretty essential way to think about so much abuse. You have the power to take from people the gold that is theirs inherently. But because you are so deficient in your own inner gold because you projected it out, now there is just like a chasm that has to get filled. And people do it. Watch any documentary. Watch the Hillsong documentary. I know Carl Lentz has made motion in different ways. I kind of like what he says. I don't know where he's at. Like, I don't know the guy, but I will say there were people working 20 hours a day for Hillsong without pay, and at that time believed that they were getting a good deal, right? And now there are support groups for people who basically wasted years of their life working for this kind of multi-level marketing thing. Because guess what? The pastor has an absolute chasm that needs filled with this gold of their congregants. And then they teach their congregants to do the same thing. So then those congregants go out and they try to evangelize and get more followers, right? Because they need, it's a Ponzi scheme, right? I think that's a Ponzi scheme. They're actually, all the money goes to the top. Everyone is buying into the system and they go into debt. They need more people to come in to essentially like pay off the debt. When you think about it psychologically, that is how it functions in a lot of ways. It never looks malicious, actually. In fact, it will look like a lot of niceness most of the time. It will just look like so much niceness. But at the end of the day, everyone is walking around unknowingly, psychologically, and emotionally, and spiritually in debt to something because they don't have access to their own natural resources. So if you've left the church, if that is no longer your space, keep in mind that you also may have invested a lot of gold into those spaces. And if you've never gotten it back, you left the church, but that's like cutting up your, it's like you have a checking account with an organization like, I don't like how they do business anymore. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to cut up my debit card and throw it in the trash. It's like Ron Swanson when he's like terrified of the internet, so he goes and throws his monitor in the trash. I'm like, what? That actually didn't do anything. In fact, that completely cut you off from access to getting back whatever it is you think got stolen. Like, you got to go get that back. You have to go back into that stuff and see, what is it that was extracted out of me non-consensually, most likely. You didn't know. You didn't consent to what you were giving away. They probably didn't even know what they were giving away or taking from you. It's all an unconscious process, but you got to go back and do that work if you want to move into the authentic, mature version of what it is you were trying to do back then. So, there comes this moment when the person carrying your gold can give it back. That isn't taught. It's not taught in seminaries, I can tell you that. There's no teaching on the fact that people are walking around projecting the image of God on you. So you don't know that you're carrying it. But you have to ask for it back, even if that is internally in shadow work. Let me know. I love this kind of work. I love this kind of work so much, helping people reclaim the gold they've lost along the way so that they can now go and live like the actual life that they want to live. If you're someone who has carried a lot of projections for other people, you may not realize this, but like if you never gave them that gold back, you likely still have it. You might not think you have it because you're like, well, it's not on me. It's somewhere in your proximity, and it's not yours. It's someone else's. Now, you don't have to go and find everyone and say, hey, this is your gold. But you can do that psychologically. If there are people you're like, oh, that I feel like I'm not right with that person, go and say, hey, I know that I embodied this for you for a while, but I just want to say, like, that was yours. That's not mine. I just wanted you to know that, like, you're powerful, like you're amazing, whatever it is. I can also say that as someone who's been a pastor and been a leader and been even like kind of this quasi big brother father figure, for a lot of people, I have felt even recently what it feels like when I no longer carry the gold. Like, someone has gold on me. I don't even know that they've put gold on me. And now I'm walking around living my life, and they're having really negative reactions to things that maybe I create or I put out. And what that can do is be like, suddenly I'm getting like, oh, these are big reactions to something that I don't know that it's proportionate. But that's usually an indicator that there is gold that was on me in this case that I didn't realize was still there. And in that moment, perhaps, like, it's an invitation for me not to try to war. I mean, it is. It's an invitation for me to not try to war with the reaction, but to just let it fall. Because if I war with it, it's in some ways me like trying to get it back, or me trying to push it off. Like, don't look at me like that. Oh, like, I get it. I have the same people, but like, just let it fall. Let it fall. Okay. Going back to Jesus. If Jesus remains only an object of, it only remains an ideal. If Jesus remains an ideal, then the cross really only becomes a signal, a sign, a signal of something that happened esoterically, meaning it wasn't embodied. Okay? If Jesus is the ideal, then the best thing possible for us is proximity to the esoteric Jesus. Now, we'll feel it, we'll feel emotional, but eventually we won't. Like, eventually those emotions like stop flowing, because when we just constantly project onto someone, it doesn't stay static. If water drips on a rock for long enough, that water will wear that rock down. And that's what happens, like, when we try to continue to project our gold onto some divine holder, some holder that, we put our gold on, it wears them down, for us at least. They might not even know it's happening. But we eventually can't maintain that projection anymore. We will either start to resent and hate them, or it will just fall so flat. Or we will get smaller and smaller in order to invest more and more gold, because it's going to take more and more to uphold the projection. But if you allow Jesus to be a mirror, then let's just use the cross again, right? The death of Jesus. If you allow Jesus to be a mirror, then his death becomes an invitation, an opportunity for you to die. It becomes an image on how you can follow your own path towards that death. And you can move into that death knowing that you're following Jesus, not after the you're following him into that death and into your own death and into your own resurrection. And that resurrection is not the same as, oh, I made it, It's like when you get in the boat after you've been swimming out in the open waters, it's the best is not just like getting onto the boat. It's then to be reborn into something wildly more divine and embodied divinity, where you are now living this life, and you'll hear pastors talk about Jesus, like, oh, he did these this crazy shit after he was resurrected. 500 people saw him, and like he walked through walls and like ate a fish or something. And like, I don't know, like there's a lot of story. Some of it's there, some of it's not. Even what's there, what is it? Doesn't matter, because it's yours to find out. It doesn't matter what happened to Jesus. What you have is a template to follow, to write your own novel, to write your own story, not to regurgitate, and not to write on the coattails of Jesus or any divine image that did it for you. I said in my last podcast, actually, like if Jesus died for you, like if that's how you think about it, it means absolutely nothing. Yes, that's heresy. And I don't care. I like literally, it's heretical to a system that essentially has colonialized your spirituality. It is heresy to a colonial religion to co-opt anything that is organically grown inside of you out to some power structure, even if that power structure tries to make itself look like the humble nature of a carpenter in Palestine. It's still disembodying you from your actual life. Jesus was always trying to return the gold. Colonial spirituality, religion is just trying to collect it. Over and over again in the Gospels, Jesus flips this narrative. And what he does is he flips the narrative from dependency to empowerment, from passivity to action. Okay, like embodied action, agency. Let's do that. Passivity to agency. He says in Matthew, "You are the light of the world." So, like in a sense, I am not. You are. You are the light of the world. Maybe I am, but so are you. Don't hide it. Shine. Literally, like a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Like you are the light. You are the salt. Salt is connected to earth. Like you are the ground. You are the space, the container from which all things grow. You are the light. You are the illumination. You are the one that illuminates. And now I know there's going to be comments. There's like, well, like who's the, or Michael, you're not the light. I actually had a comment the other day. It says, anytime you use I or me, you are off track. I'm like, okay, so that's interesting. You also psychologically have to use I and me in order to embody anything. Otherwise, you start to identify with the divine, and people who refuse to use I and me in their developmental process will eventually become wildly, absorbed by the divine energy, and there's no difference between them and God in this like power, egocentric power sense. These are your cult leaders. These are your narcissistic like users of people who actually never developed an ego, meaning they never learned how to embody and to own parts of themselves. So they actually just absorbed with archetypal energy. And then those are the people who destroy things, destroy lives and cultures. That is absolutely Christian nationalism at a macro level. That is absolutely this like end times thing at a macro level. Jesus says the kingdom of God is within you. It's not out there, right? So if it's within you, it's inside of you. Doesn't mean that it's like hidden. It means that it is something you have, not something you don't have. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says, I believe this is maybe the man with the withered hand, "Go in peace, your faith has made you well." In a sense, like, go, you've made yourself well. Now, yes, would they have done that if Jesus hadn't have been there? Probably not, because that's why projection's helpful. That power was in that person to do that. They had to have someone to hold that power for them so they could own it. I started a journey with my financial stuff. 6 months ago, money was dirty, money was evil, money was scary, money held all of these really negative things. Until I met a number of people who had just a good relationship with money. They were friends with money. They're not millionaires. They're not afraid of being millionaires, but they're also they have an abundance mindset. Like they got a good relationship with it. The same way I have a good relationship with my kids. I just feel like there's enough of them. I don't want more than two, but also there's enough of who they are, and there's a lot to explore, and I don't have to know all the stuff. My relationship with money has shifted because I've been around people who could hold the energy that I needed someone else to hold around money so that I could eventually own it. Okay? Your faith has made you well. You can make yourself well. Yes, you might need someone to hold up that mirror, hold that gold, hold that power for you while you get on your own feet, while you stand up, while you get into a place of receptivity, but then it's yours. Okay. He also says there's another time, this might be the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. You know this one, right? He says something like, daughter, your faith has healed you. If you remember, Jesus is in a large crowd of people. She reaches out and touches, as it said, the hem of his garment. And, he has this energetic, someone touch me. And he goes and finds her, your faith. He didn't do anything. We are told that was Jesus's power. Now you can say, okay, yeah, there was energy that left him, wasn't there? But think about that psychologically. It left him and went into her and healed her. She went and got her energy back, her power back. Not that he was hoarding it, but she had put it on him. She probably put it on him when she heard that he had the power to do this, right? He had the power. And now she is pulling that back into herself. And that's just not me saying that. That's literally Jesus' words. Daughter, your faith has healed you. All right? So, who are you projecting gold onto? Who carries the image of God for you? What space, what container, what community has been idealized? Don't reject that. It's okay if you have projected something onto someone. You need to do that. Just be conscious of it and begin embodying actions that pull you into greater ownership of that gold. And if there are people, pastors in particular, churches, organizations that you invested energy into, but then they never gave it back, you never got it back, you left, you cut up the debit card and said, well, I'm done with that, or you threw your monitor away in the trash, let's go back and get that. These are the moments of gold exchange, and they're yours. They're not whoever's been holding them, ultimately. So if it feels like it's time to get that back, go get it back. You may need someone to carry a particular part of you that you're trying to heal, that you're trying to integrate, that you're trying to advance to, professionally. That's good. Seek them out consciously, but know that you're entering into a gold-carrying exchange temporarily. And that when you get that gold back, it's actually not just you getting back what you've put on, but it's exponential what you get back. When you take time to invest in getting back what you've lost, there is this kind of quantum leaping that happens in whether that's healing, growth, professional advancing. It happens because you raise the divine energy that is in you to a whole new level, and now you're actually able to process a lot more. I posted something recently that therapist that was talking about you need to be able to process more stress through your nervous system. And oftentimes that's what growth looks is something that used to derail you for a few days now is like a little gnat that doesn't have the same effect. That's because you're metabolizing stressors that used to completely bog you down. You're metabolizing them through your nervous system so much faster. And that's what she says, this therapist says, is the indicator of healing, how much you can process through your nervous system. And sometimes those things are bad, yes, but sometimes what you need to be able to process through your nervous system is your divine golden self, because it's the good things that often scare us the most about ourselves and keep us off balance and keep us in a place of fear and scarcity, because we're actually afraid of how much goodness is out there. Hi, Michael here. Hey, seriously, thank you for listening and engaging the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel. I trust today's episode gave you something to reflect on or illuminated a new trailhead to your hidden life. If this episode resonated with you, you can subscribe, leave a comment or review, and share it with your people. This really helps spread the word and boosts our digital presence. Remember, growth isn't a straight line, and we're all figuring it out as we go. I'm grateful to be in this unfolding and excavating work with you. Until next time, be yourself. You've got a good self. And remember, it is all a gift.